First of all, I want to say thank you so much for being one of my Patreon supporters. It really, truly means a lot to me and encourages me to keep going and go even dive deeper with my research. I want to show you guys a couple updates for this LMND retention curve spreadsheet. If you didn't see my latest public video, I do walk through this spreadsheet there, but I added a few more enhancements to it if you want to play around with it yourself. So I added, first of all, an interest rate, and so this is an annualized interest rate here, and this pulls back all these gross earned premium per customer in each cohort. It brings back these values to a present day value based on the 6%. So if cost of capital was 25%, it's going to drop all of these values down, right? They're going to lower those down to the present day. Not very significant on the first few quarters because it's only 1 quarter away. If it was 0%, of course, it's going to push all of these numbers then back up. So and of course, then the sum of all those numbers, your lifetime value, is also going to shift up or down accordingly for each cohort. So I have it set at 6% right now. I'm just going to kind of leave it there. But then going forward, I also added a few more interesting things in. Before, I had a sort of a factor for after the projection of each curve. I had a factor of how that curve would diminish over time that you could kind of adjust with up here. But I changed that instead to the expected churn from 12 months prior, because that's sort of a figure we can more relate to in what I've calculated in my LMND projection model. But you can see that figure here in my projection model. Turn from 12 months prior kind of goes from 40% to 34% to 31% to 28%. So it's kind of dropping at around roughly a 1% per quarter. So that's what I put in here myself. Started back at about 40%, got down to about 24% right now. It's a kind of a guess for what the rest of the projection for each cohort would do over time. And then from that, have a quarterly descent calculated from that 12-month number, and then of course you get your total gross earned premium or total present value, factoring in that 6% there, average loss ratio, lifetime value, and then they have customer acquisition cost listed, and then an average of those costs, and then we calculate the lifetime value divided by the CAC average. But you can play with a lot of these variables here. Like if you think churn, I actually think churn might go down. In my other model here, I have churn going as low eventually as 17%. So if I have 17% here, suddenly your LTV to CAC jumps to over 5 if you could get down to that kind of range. Like, it becomes much more profitable, those cohorts, for what you're doing. It's also interesting. You can play with the average loss ratio. So even where we're set up right now, we're at 61%. LMND's saying these customers are going to have an average loss ratio of 61%. But maybe you think that's not realistic. So if it's 75%, you still have a 2.5 LTV to CAC sort of ratio then. So and if it's 61%, like they're saying, then you're at 3.9. Of course, if it's something like 85%, well, now you're only at 1.5. Or if you're at even 95%, well, now you're less than half those. It's not good for the cost of acquiring them. You're only going to get half the value back at best. So that's a fun one. That's interesting to play with as well. Especially just seeing that it's still, even at 75%, we're still at a 2.5 ratio at 24% still churn. So, obviously the sky's the limit. If it goes to 61% or say 66, let's leave it 61 right now, and this goes to 17, then you're that over 5 ratio. Maybe this even goes to 55%. Then you're over 6 ratio. That's probably unrealistic. But even if it's 65%, say, you're still at 4.75. So still really, really good. Even if it's 70, you're still over 4. So in that range. So yeah, to my opinion, still really, really positive. And of course, at 24%, 61%, you're still close to that 4 range. And before we're at sort of 2.9 and 2.6, sort of close to the 3 range, which is sort of the figures I've heard LMND cite before. Of course, you can also play with the premium per customer. I've kind of laid this out, and I actually just did adjust this because I adjusted it in my other model. But I've laid this out to match my model, where we're going all the way to about just 1,400 and so in the 2030s. This might be too low, but I'm kind of expecting they'll continue to push customer growth into new areas all throughout their development. So obviously, depending how you play with the premium per customer, that's going to affect your overall lifetime value. But what is shown here is what I have imported currently into the retention model, retention and LTV model here. So if you increase this, you think premium per customer, actually they're going to really concentrate in the US, and they're going to actually be at $2,000, $3,000 per customer by 2030. They really just grow in the markets that they're currently in. And of course, your LTV is going to rise significantly for each customer cohort, especially as the premiums continue to rise in the future as we go forward in time. Anyways, I'd love to hear what you think about this model. Feel free to play around with it yourselves. Give me any feedback you have. Thanks you once again for being my Patreon supporters. Really means a lot. So thank you. Okay, remember, it's in the bag.